Bonjour everyone, Pantoufleee here today for a new video in which we're going to talk a little bit about the upcoming meta for the 8.2 update. Simply because Wargaming decided to come back, let's say, back to the past, simply because before this 8.2 update, the Heavies were running the battlefield. And it was, in my opinion, for the best, simply because those tanks are supposed to be the main one, because they are the easiest to be played by newbies, but also because when it comes to heavy tanks, I don't know, it's natural for me. I feel like those tanks are the ones that are supposed to be the main on the battlefield. But it seems like Wargaming disagree with me simply because if you take a look at the updated parameters, or I should say the patch note for the 8.2 update, a lot of heavies, not to say all of them, are getting seriously nerfed. And what I mean by that is that the nerf is, let's say, in two different parts. The first one is the reload time of those tanks that will be lowered down, as you can see on the T125, for example, coming from 9.5 to 10.5. It's the exact same for pretty much every single one of them. And on top of that, the mobility and especially the traverse speed of those tanks had been severely reduced. When you take a look at the turret traverse speed of the T125, for example, it's losing 4 degrees. So the worst one, if I remember correctly, is the Kranwagen, and I'm going to show you that right now. As you can see, the turret traverse speed, that is limited to half what it was before. And the thing is, by doing this, we are actually going backward, and I'm going to explain to you in this video why. For the OGs out there, you possibly remember before the 6.9 update where, or when I should say, the heavy tanks received the big HP pool buff. Wargaming did that simply to make them relevant again, because before the 6.9 update, the mainly class used in this game was the medium, simply because they were ruling the battlefield. After the 6.9 update, and especially the big hit points buff that all the tanks received, especially the most with 3,000, or yeah, 3,000 that was, they made it relevant again, and those tanks were coming back on the battlefield. But it seems like nowadays, so possibly nearly 1.5 years ago, because the update dropped on 24th March 2020, it seems like Wargaming came back on their decision, thinking that the heavy tanks are too much, and yeah, doing that, they are nerfing them. But instead of nerfing what they previously buffed, aka the hit points, they are nerfing the abilities of those tanks by making them less accurate, but also reload longer, and finally by decreasing, or no, increasing, I should say, their traverse speed, which will make them, no, decreasing the traverse speed, which will make them slower overall and forced to go to close combat in order to be effective. So today we're going to ask ourselves two questions: why this update, and especially why the heavy nerfs, and finally, how is it going to affect the current meta? Starting with the first question, why is that nerf kind of needed? I'm going to answer that simply by stating the overall abilities of the players. Most of the players playing this game are playing it wrong, or kind of sucks, to be honest. And the thing is, most of the people using heavy tanks are effectively camping. The problem with this is that heavy tanks are supposed, in order to be effective, to be the first one on the battlefield. You are here to take shots, you are here to die first, not necessarily die first, but at least tank shots, and you are especially here to frighten your opponents. Nobody is scared by a heavy tank staying in a bush, not moving, and being spotted at the very last second of the game. And this is what made Wargaming possibly change the gun dispersion of all those tanks, because if you take a look at the patch note for the 8.2 update, you will see that most of those are gonna receive a gun dispersion nerf in order to make them less effective at long range and much more effective at short range. Why is Wargaming doing that? To imply to the players that in order to be effective with heavy tanks, they have to come closer, sorry. Now, the second thing about this is that Wargaming is nerfing the overall traverse speed of those tanks as well. What does it imply? It implies that for high mobility tanks like the T62A I'm playing right now, or pretty much all the mediums, and also all of the light tanks, you will be able to circle them much easier. What does it imply? It implies that the mediums are going to come back, or are going to take back the crown from the heavy tanks for the best class in the game. Because yes, after the 8.2 update, I'm afraid that we're going to go back to the past, simply because the mediums are going to be better than the heavy tanks, like it was the case before the 6.9 update. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not going to change anything, but I guess that if Wargaming is slightly nerfing all those tanks, people will play more and more the tanks that did not get nerfed in order to have some fun on the battlefield. And doing that, it's going to completely destroy the purpose of the heavy tanks on some maps. Not all of them, simply because heavy tanks on maps like Himmelsdorf or city maps will still be quite relevant, but an open map like it's the case for this one here, no, you are gonna struggle as a heavy tank. And I know most of the really good players are gonna switch definitely to medium tanks, even if they did already, because the medium tanks are still the best class when you know how to play this game. They are gonna completely destroy the purpose of heavy tanks, at least for higher tier. Maybe it's gonna change something also on the tournament scene. Maybe people will privilege all the mediums, but I don't think it's gonna happen because they still need armor. But what I like with Wargaming is that here they are really dividing the different classes in the game, because the mediums are here to be effective on pretty much every single terrain, and if you have a little bit of skill, you know what to do. But when you're a heavy tank, you are not supposed to go faster than a medium, like it's the case for some. You are not supposed to be able to outperform a medium on its mobility, and you are supposed to be circled by them. And the thing is, most of the tanks, the heavy tanks that we have in the game, do not allow that, except if you are really skilled or if you are using the right equipment on your tank, allowing you to increase your mobility. And the thing is, that's something Wargaming didn't want, and I truly understand why. It's simple. It's simple. Why would you put in the game two different class, medium and heavy tanks, if the heavy tanks have the same mobility as the mediums? It's not logic. This is why the nerf was forced. Now, there is one last thing that we need to take into consideration while talking about this. It's the fact that if Wargaming nerfed them, how hard are they gonna be when they are getting back on track during the 8.2 update? Will those tanks still be performing or not? This is a question we can't answer yet because we'll have to wait for Wargaming to release the update. But don't worry, I'll do a full review of all those tanks and of those newly implemented mediums when they will be available in the 8.2 update, because yes, on top of the nerf the heavies are receiving, most of the mediums are receiving a huge buff, which implies that Wargaming wants to come back to a medium performing meta. Is this for the best? Is this for the worst? In my opinion, I think it's for the worst, because I liked the fact that heavy tanks were the best on the battlefield, but hey, Wargaming decided that it will change, so it will. Hopefully you enjoyed, guys. If that's the case, feel free to subscribe, like, and share. And tell me in the comments, what do you think about the 8.2 update? Do you think that the medium tanks are going to rule again, or do you think that the heavy tanks will still have the first place? I'm curious to know what you think, because in my opinion, there is no way the heavy tanks are still going to be relevant. The mediums are going to come back with maybe the tank destroyers at the second position. So maybe Wargaming is trying to switch the current meta, you know, like 1 year it's the heavy, 1 year it's the medium, 1 year it's the tank destroyers. I don't really know where they're going, but we'll have to wait and give a chance to the 8.2 update to know what Wargaming intended to do. See ya.